Number 1. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. When I was in the 5th grade, I started going to a middle school named Dorothy Fisher Magnet Middle School. It was there that I met Patrick Slepak. We became really good friends very quickly. He was smart, funny, charming, good-looking, and kind-hearted. Or so I thought. We were best friends until I moved out of the city of Detroit and attended a different high school. We lost touch when we were about 15 or 16 years old. I always wondered what happened to him, and I thought of him often over the years. In February 2006, I heard about the murder of Melissa Beryls and her husband, Scott. They lived a few miles down the road from me. Melissa was 10 weeks pregnant. Patrick befriended Melissa after shopping at the grocery store where she worked. He wanted more than just friendship. He followed her home one day and convinced Melissa to let him and his girlfriend, Samantha, come in and hang out for a while. Patrick had guns with him. He hit Melissa in the head with the gun and knocked her to the ground. He proceeded to strangle her with a belt. He convinced his girlfriend to help him because it was taking too long for her to die. During this, Melissa's husband came home. He was hit in the head with a gun and then locked in the bathroom while Pat and his girlfriend finished killing Melissa. Once she was dead, they turned their attention to Scott. Samantha went to CVS and got duct tape, syringes, and a few other things. They tried injecting bleach into Scott's veins to kill him. That didn't work. Scott was tortured for about 4 hours before he finally succumbed to his injuries. Pat and Samantha moved the bodies to the back room. They wrapped them in painter's plastic and duct taped it. They covered the bodies with a tarp, and then they left. Melissa's parents called the police to do a welfare check when she didn't show up for work. Police found the bodies under the tarp in a room the Beryls were decorating for the baby they were going to have. Patrick and Samantha fled the Beryls' house in their car. They also had stolen the couple's personal documents so they could assume their identities. Somehow, Pat and Samantha ended up in Flint, Michigan. They met a man at a gay club that offered to give them a place to stay. They stayed with him for 3 days before the man saw the news and tried to convince Pat to turn himself in. The man walked outside, saying he was going to get the police himself. Patrick flipped out and shot the man in the back. Pat then walked up to the man and shot him in the head. Pat and Samantha wrapped this man up in the same way they did the Beryls, and they put his body in the back of the man's pickup truck and covered it with a tarp. The next day, a friend of Samantha's called and asked Sam if she was going to give her a ride to a job interview. Samantha said she would. Before Pat and Samantha got to the girl's house, she saw on the TV that they were wanted for murder. She still let them pick her up for the interview. They drove the girl to the hotel where her interview was. She asked them to wait for her outside, because she wouldn't be long. As soon as she got inside the hotel, she called the police. When the police arrived, they restrained Patrick and Samantha and found the body in the bed of the truck. Patrick and Samantha are now both serving life sentences with no possibility of parole. They were featured on the ID Channel show Wicked Attraction. The title of the episode is Single White Male, which aired in 2009. If anyone would like to verify the story, there are millions of links on Google. Their full names are Patrick Slepak and Samantha Bakinski. Number 2. My best friend lived in the country part of my town. It was a small neighbourhood, and everyone knew each other. There was a man there that we all referred to as Creepy Phil, because he would lurk around and make weird comments to people. He was old and skinny. We never thought anything of it though. He was just the weird neighbour. I remember one time we had a neighbourhood barbecue, and we invited all our high school friends over, which were both guys and girls. I remember Creepy Phil standing at the gate, not being a part of the barbecue, and asking the girls if they needed rides home. We just laughed and thought it was just plain old Creepy Phil. One day, Creepy Phil asked us to dig a retaining wall for his house, and he said he'd pay us. We agreed, for we were always doing small jobs like that to make money. I remember doing the job and noticing his backyard. The backyard was extremely cluttered with tons of garbage and sheds in the back. Creepy Phil would just sit there and watch us work. We finished the job and went home. A few months passed by, and I'm watching the news. There was a picture of a skinny old man and his wife being displayed on the breaking news. It was Creepy Phil and his wife. It turns out, Creepy Phil had kidnapped a 10-year-old girl 18 years ago and moved into the house and raped her for 18 years, right next door to where my best friend and I were growing up. The girl that he kidnapped ended up having 2 children in secrecy, and Creepy Phil raped the daughters as well. The clutter and sheds that I saw whilst working at his house was where he kept the girls. When the police raided his backyard, there was an elaborate maze of tents where the girl, who was now an adult, lived with her daughters for 18 years. The daughters were so pale because they'd never even seen sunlight, and their skin was as white as ghosts. This gave me chills, and to this day, I still have nightmares of those girls being raped, and me having barbecues, playing basketball, and enjoying my life, no more than 100 feet away. The girl's name is JC Duggard. She's now a motivational speaker and a best-selling author. Check out her story, it's very interesting, but also, be wary of your neighbours. The submitter of this story also attached this image of Creepy Phil, his wife, and the area where the girls were kept. Number 3. My name is Ned. I'm 33, soon to be 34, and I'm the only child of Ted Bundy survivor Carol DeRonch. Her story takes place on November 8th, 1974, in a Sears parking lot in Salt Lake City. She was out shopping when a man, claiming to be a police officer, approached her, saying that her car was stolen. He asked her to go with him in his car down to the police station for questioning. Whilst they were driving, the man handcuffed her and tried to kidnap her. The problem was that the man, now known as Ted Bundy, had accidentally only cuffed one hand, leaving her free to escape by jumping out of the car. Ted frantically drove off. Unfortunately, later that night, another young woman named Deborah Kent, the same age as my mother at the time, 18, was raped and murdered by Bundy. My mother was present at his 1979 trial and became a damning piece of evidence against Bundy. Bundy was sentenced to death and executed in 1989 at the age of 42. My mother has never forgotten the experience and was always adamant about keeping me safe as a kid, as she knew of the dangers in the world. She finally told me when I was 16, after I'd seen a documentary on TV about Ted Bundy. My mother has moved on from the experience, but always has it in the back of her mind that you shouldn't trust anyone based on who they say they are. For those curious about the legitimacy of this post, The original poster has left a link to a news article. You can find a link in the description below. Number 4. When I was young, about 12 years old, I had a best friend named Sonia. We did everything together. She'd stay over at my house every weekend. She lived right down the street, in a house that looked condemned. I was never allowed to go to her house. My mum always said that her family was a bit off. I only met her dad a few times. Her mum died years ago. When I did meet her dad, he smelled terrible, almost sour. Come to think of it, Sonia never smelled that great either. I didn't care much though. I remember one night when she was staying over at my house. It was really late, and the doorbell rang. Sonia was asleep, and I went downstairs to see my mum, looking to see who it was. My mum opened the door, and I heard a man asking for Sonia. "Hey, is Sonia here? Her daddy said she wasn't home tonight. I'd really like to see her." My mum asked if he was a relative of hers. He danced around the question until giving up and leaving. My mum was really weirded out and called Sonia's dad. He answered, but was so drunk that my mum couldn't decipher anything he was saying. The next morning, my mum asked Sonia if she knew the guy that stopped by. My mum described how he looked and what he asked. Sonia looked up from her breakfast really fast. With wide eyes, she asked if he was here. My mum told her no. Sonia looked relieved. Sonia stopped showing up to school after this. I never knew why. I was sad for the rest of the school year. She wasn't in school and her house was empty. It's like she vanished. I actually remembered her last year and asked my mum if she remembered Sonia as well. My mum nodded her head and said, "Oh man, that whole thing was so sad." I asked what happened. Why didn't she tell me before? She told me that the man at the door that night looked like a big drug user. He kept messing with his junk and looking around nervously. My mum got worried for Sonia and called the police the next day. The police did their job. And apparently, Sonia's dad was prostituting her out to his friends. They would bring alcohol and some cash, and they'd take turns with Sonia. When they investigated further, Sonia told the police that her dad had raped her too. Sonia was actually pregnant with her father's child. My mum found all this out because she was a big help and friends with some of the police. Sonia went on to go and live with family somewhere else. We don't know what else happened. So Sonia, it would be nice to meet you again. Number 5. I grew up in a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, that has a virtually non-existent crime rate. My father and I moved there when I was 6. He was always busy, so I pretty much had to raise myself. So, naturally, I attended school there, made all of my lifelong relationships there, so on, so forth. In 2008, I was a senior in high school. I had a very close-knit group of friends, primarily composed of people I'd known since middle school. One such friend had just recently come back from Holly Hill, which was our local mental hospital, after a suicide attempt. Matt had been gone for a couple of weeks. I saw him in the courtyard before heading to class. Unfortunately, I didn't really have time to talk, so all I had time to say to him was, "Welcome back, I missed you." I would have risked being late to class if I'd have known that that would be the last thing I would say to him. Matt had suffered from depression and dementia for years, but he kept a pretty good rap on the details, so none of his friends really had a big inkling on how severe it was until the aforementioned suicide attempt. We got out of school for Thanksgiving break, and one of our mutual friends messaged me on Facebook and asked if I'd like to go paintballing with them on the night of the 30th. I had to turn them down, because I had to go and see my grandparents the next morning for a late Thanksgiving celebration. It wasn't a big deal, just kind of a disappointment. Break came and went. We went back to school. Matt was absent again. There had been a rumour floating around that he had run away from home and gone to Washington DC to look for his birth mother. But I wasn't sure I believed that, especially that he would go off on this long-term trip without at least mentioning it to me first. In between switching classes, I called his cell phone to find it off. I didn't think anything of it. A few days later, during lunchtime, there was a buzz around the school that Allegra, our mutual friend from earlier, and Adele, someone else who I was more of acquaintances with than friends, had been taken out of class and arrested. We had no idea what had happened, but I had a strange feeling that it had something to do with Matt's absence. After that, all I could really think about was where Matt was, and the fact that Allegra sat right behind me during Shakespeare class, and that she was really tired, and she slept through the whole class on the day that we came back from the break. The school tried to keep everything quiet in regards to the students theorizing and talking to one another, but it was high school, and word travels fast. When we weren't talking, we were texting each other about it. Our local news website reported, in an article, that 4 of Matt's friends had been arrested in connection with a body found in Allegra's parents' summer home. You guessed it. It was Matt's. 2 years afterwards, Allegra, Adele, and 2 other people from Matt's circle of friends went on trial. Allegra received 2 consecutive 20-year terms for conspiracy to commit murder and murder in the second degree. Adele received the same. The 2 others in the trial received a life sentence for first-degree murder and accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. I watched the trial unfold. All of the trial is available online as well, if anyone wanted to learn about it. There's a lot more details than I can post here, without boring everyone, but you should be able to type in some of the details in a Google search and find the story. They killed him on the night of November 30th, the night they asked me to come paintballing with them. There was a period of time where I kicked myself for not going that night. I like to think that if I had gone, I would have had some, if a little, influence in stopping them. They didn't really seem to have a huge reason for killing him. A guy called Ryan was the mastermind behind it all. It was all his thing. I guess he was just super manipulative. Allegra said in the trial, "I just wanted Ryan to love and trust me again." So, people who I thought I knew and thought were friends of myself and Matt, fuck you. Note, links to videos of the trial can be found in the description below. Hi guys, Lazy Masquerade here. Subscribe and join the Lazy Legion. We're 70,000 strong now, and that's truly unbelievable. I really appreciate all the ways in which you guys interact with the channel, be that through your comments on YouTube or your interactions on Twitter and Facebook, by sending me emails with your own experiences, or, however. So props to all of you for that. Thank you very much. Also, a major thank you to Anthony, who created the thumbnail for this video, and so many others in the past that I've done as well. He does some great stuff, guys, so follow the links in the description to support him if you like his style. He's a really great guy as well, so a major thank you to him. I'll have some paranormal stories coming out on Sunday, so keep an eye out for that as well. Until then. watch your back. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.